Welcome back to another week of Bible study. This week, we're jumping back into the story, and this time we'll be talking about Abram's transformation to Abraham. So, without further ado, let's get to it. All right, let's get this thing started. Okay, let's share the screen. Just 1 second. I don't know why this thing's not working. Okay, give me 1 second. Can you guys see it? Okay, perfect. Okay, and I don't know why it's not showing up on my screen. Give me 1 second, you guys. Okay, now it should be good. Okay, 'cause now it's on my screen now too. Okay, cool. Um, all right. Okay, so let's get started. So, like I said, from Abram to Abraham, the faithful transformation. We're from Genesis 15 to 19 this week. We'll go over the covenant, the conflict of Hagar, Ishmael, and Sodom and Gomorrah, and we'll see exactly the faith that's being tested and the blessing that follows with that. So, right here we have just a quick recap of last week. We have Abram who left Ur, which was a very prosperous city, a very prosperous place. Um, think of New York City, you know, a place where it's bustling with just life. You have probably the best technology. You have everybody coming to sell things. Everybody's there. Everybody wants to be there. It's like the landscape, the place you want to be if you want to be famous or rich. This is where Abram is from. Over there, they're polytheistic, so they serve plenty of gods, especially a god Nana, who is supposed to be the fertility god. That was one of the gods that Abram was very devout in serving. We didn't go over Nana last week, but I saved it for this week because it ties more into his name. Now, when we're looking at the map where Ur is, the Ur of Chaldea, which is closer to Egypt and where Ethiopia would be, there is different cities. There's a city named Nahor, which is the same name as Abram's brother that passed away. There's some other names of some of his other family members. There would have been a city of Abram, but the reason why there wasn't a city of Abram where he was from was because Abram didn't have kids. Now, usually when you have a place or a settlement, a city named after you, it's because you started a family, and where you guys live, where your tent is established, that is going to be your village. That's where your descendants are going to be. That's going to be your place. Abraham had no name. He had no namesake. But when his parents had him, when Terah had him, they named him High Father or Exalted Father. Exalted Father pretty much meant he was going to be a great person. He was going to have a great nation to follow him. He was going to have descendants that was going to make his name great. But the problem was the person he was married to, Sarai, was barren, which is why he kept praying and was so devout to the god or the goddess Nana. He was hoping Nana would give him a child. He was hoping Nana would bless him with the opportunity to bear that great name and be something. However, the more he prayed to Nana, the less he heard, the less he was blessed, and the less he had. He was rich, but that meant nothing if you had no kid to inherit it. So, if you can understand what that means in that day and age, if you have no heir, you mean nothing because you have nothing. So, this is why Abram was a person who had no desire to live. He had no, no ambition. It was as if, what am I living for? And because of that, that is why when God tells him to get up, God didn't just tell him, drop your stuff and leave and just be like that. God told him, leave his stuff, everything that he known, all the people that he known, and follow him with the promise of a child. He'll make him a great nation. To which that was enough to lure him away because that's really what he wanted. He wanted to change his fate. You're in a city that's bustling, that's rich, and you can't get a child, not even one. He thinks he's getting something when his brother Nahor dies and he ends up adopting his son Lot. And he thinks, I'm going to get something. At least I can use Lot as my seed, my heir, since I couldn't have nothing. So I'm leaving. Nobody's going to know me where I go. I can start my tent and I can be something. Nobody has to know Lot is not my biological son. So that's how we start. Then we see him walking through the desert, feeling like he's left out because, dang, God told me to leave. I left. And now here I am in the desert. We're losing food. We're going into a drought. And I don't know what's going on. Still no kid. What's next? They go into Egypt. The whole situation with the Pharaoh and his wife happens. The plagues on Egypt. He gets almost triple the amount of his wealth and everything that he has. He gets blessed and he leaves. Still no son. Lot's family starts to become bigger. They start fighting over the land. And so Abram says, have to make a tough decision. Lot, I'm gonna let you take your family and go. You can become your own person. Abram goes back to being depressed because now he don't have no heir. The only person he has left in his house is a man named Eliezer of Damascus, which is one of his servants that he picked up. It's not even related to him. He's like, he's gonna have to inherit everything because by law, he's the only closest male heir in this household that can inherit everything if everybody else was to be wiped out. Well, then we have Lot being stuck in the issue with Sodom and Gomorrah and being caught up with the kings fighting, the four kings versus the five kings. And this is when Abram takes 318 men and they go rescue Lot. And then he meets Melchizedek. And this is where we get something that kind of changes because after he gives his first tithing, which is a tenth of everything that he gave, Abram is happy. He's like, yeah, I just won. We won that. God was with us. But then the depression hits again. So he returns from victory. He's wealthy, but he's still unfulfilled. He has what a lot of people who do come from battle have, which is post victory depression, which is a real thing. While he's still waiting for God's voice, he's still walking around the city. He's still walking around the desert, making wells to praise God's name and not realizing he's mapping out the promised land. And I actually got the map for you guys too. He's exactly where he needs to be, but the silence is making him feel like I might not be doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So, one of the things that we talked about last week was Melchizedek, he didn't have any lineage. One of the reasons why some scholars actually believe that he didn't have any lineage because they believe he's actually Shem, Noah's son. Remember, after the flood, everybody else after the flood started having lifespans closer to about 120 years. But Shem was born before the flood, being Noah's son. He would have been probably around 600 years old at this time. So a lot of them believe he was the person that Abram met, and because he would still have the keys to the past, the knowledge of the past, and knowing what God actually did, which is the reason why they called him the King of Peace, the King of Knowledge, and the King of God. So some people believed he was a, this word always trips me up a little bit, but a theophany, which is pretty much like an appearance of God in human form. Not a physical one, but as if you can see like an image of him in person. You would think it's a real person, but in reality, it's just the light, the spirit. Which was the first version of Christ before Christ was able to actually be in a physical body. So after all this, like I said, it's chapters 14 to 15. Abram is expressing his concern over having no children. Again, like I told you, Eliezer of Damascus is the only person that can be legally become his heir. And that was very troubling to him because again, that's not my son. He's not even my cousin. At least Lot was my nephew. This guy is just one of my servants. So God takes Abraham, or my bad, Abram outside, and he shows him a vision. And he shows him the sky, the whole solar system pretty much. And he tells him to pretty much count the stars. And Abram says he can't do that. And he says, all those, as numerous as those stars, is how your descendants will be. And he reaffirms the promise that he gave him, that he's going to give him a land. But at the same time, God gives him another vision, and where he shows, because of the doubt that Abram has, his descendants are going to be stuck with what we call the 400 years of bondage, slavery. And we do later see that. That's the nation of Israel when they're in Egypt before Moses brings them out. But again, we'll get there eventually. A couple weeks, matter of fact. All right. So I wanted to get a physical description of where Abram was walking around. Now, this is close to the Mediterranean. Of course, this is the land of Canaan that he's mapping out, and he's just pacing through. So this is showing a little bit of his walking, goes north, south, east, and west. He just goes around, turns around, goes back. As you see, this is on the left side is where he went to Egypt during that famine and then goes back. So I wish I had the arrows on there to kind of show you how he was walking, but for the most part, this is pretty much the way he kind of went around. Okay. Not knowing that every time he stopped to pray and make a well, debating if he's doing, doing the right thing or if he's just wasting his time. You go from having many gods to believing one God and actually going all in and not hearing anything else from this God. Depression would hit anybody. So, as Abram and Sarai are trying to figure out what exactly do we do here, God tells me I'm going to be fruitful. I'm going to have a nation after me. Everything's going to work out for the best. What do I do? So, Sarai, seeing how depressed and just how Abram is moving, he says, all right, bet. I got a plan. Sarah has a plan. She says, we're pretty much going to make this plan happen. God says it's going to happen. We're going to make it happen. So Sarah told Abram to take her maidservant, or you can call it maid wife, Hagar, to have a child with, since she was barren and she could not give birth to a child. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about marriage in the biblical sense and how a maid servant or maid wife would play a role in that thing, in the whole story. Now, where does Hagar come from? She's an Egyptian woman. She is presumed to have started being a servant and maid servant for Sarai after the events that happened with Pharaoh when they left Egypt. One of the ways for Pharaoh to kind of clear his conscience was to give her a maid servant to be under her. So let's take a quick pause and go over the culture aspect of what a marriage and what the maid servant's point would be in this culture. So whenever somebody was going to get married in this, and we will go and refine this a little later on because there's a section with Isaac that goes over marriage where we'll actually break this down even more. But just for right now, we got three steps: the arrangement or agreement. This is the Shiddukin. This is where in that culture, once you turn about 12 to about 16, the boy and the girl, they would go through a manhood and womanhood ceremony. That would be them telling the community, I am a man, I'm a woman. Okay. Usually for the woman, it means she had her period, she can take care of the kids, she can cook, she'll go through her bat mitzvah, and she would be able to prove to the elders that she is a woman and she can be now married. The boy would get a bar mitzvah. All right. So bat mitzvah for the girl, bar mitzvah for the boy. The boy would go through certain things like speaking the Torah, first five books of the Bible, orally, pretty much memorizing it, showing that he has discipline, showing that he can do work, um, and pretty much demonstrating to the elders that he can lead his family as a man. He knows his word, so he can also be the minister of his household. So once he gets to that age, puberty is hitting as well. The girl had her period, he's going through puberty. When that happens, the father, when the son is ready, he would ask his father, hey, dad, I want to be married. The father would now take his son, he would place him in the house, tell him he can't go nowhere. Depending on which city you came from, but some of them will tell you, hey, stay put, don't go in the city, don't look at nobody, just to kind of help him stay pure. But the father would probably go to the neighbors and people in the community. So let's say you sold crates. This you had like you made boxes for storage, you made crates, and you had wagons with horses. And the house that your father goes to is a person who makes or who cultivates corn and certain crops. Your father would now have negotiations with this father and say, hey, look, my son is trying to get married. I know you have a daughter who just recently passed her bat mitzvah, he passed his bar mitzvah. So both of them are ready to be wedded. What's the price? And there's different prices you could have. So you could have what we call the bride price, which is the mohar, and you would just pay that price to the bride's family, and you would get the daughter for your son. Or you could do a matching of both families. Since you sell crates and wagons and they sell crops, you put them together, you now have a bigger family business. And that could be the joining of two families. Um, and sometimes you could also do a trade. So those are three ways of acquiring a wife. You could trade some of your servants, some of your stock, and say, hey, look, here you go. And I'm doing this in exchange for your daughter. When this happens, once the family agrees and the price or whatever the agreement was is done, this is when we have betrothal. Okay. Betrothal is what people say when they're trying to court somebody. This is the process of courtship. When we say court, people want to be courted today. There's no such thing in reality anymore. Courting does not exist in the biblical sense. Courting would be this part where the boy is staying pure and focusing in prayer, trying to get closer to God for the woman that God puts in his life so he can be the best version of himself for her. The woman is also getting herself ready you know, eating properly, getting herself together, making sure she knows all her family secrets for food and all that stuff. So now, during the Kedushin, the betrothal, there is the terms that are being set. Okay. So the families will go ahead and make everything up. They'll say, hey, look, this is your parameters because you will have a house here. They pretty much already set you up with where your house is going to be. What's your business, your family business, if you're going to inherit it from your father, if you're going to start something new, all that would be established. Okay. They already know divorce is not a thing that they like. However, that's the only way to break this contract because now it is legally binding. You guys are together. The community already knows this is who's marrying who. The goal is to not see the woman, and for the boy not to see the woman not to see the boy. Okay. Um, Before they even get married, the ceremony, whatever, they're already considered married because this contract has already been foretold. All right. So now, usually once that happens, it starts with a week-long ceremony. Okay. The boy or the son will get to meet the girl's family. He'll get to meet the parents, any siblings, but he will never get a chance to see the woman yet. That is the whole reason for the veil. Okay. Um, he's not supposed to see the bride, and at the same time, the servants of the woman's family is preparing her. So they're doing ceremonial baths. They're praying over her. She's fasting, and they set up a tent behind the family's house of the bride, and they have a, a, a pathway to this tent. Now, remember, there is no lights. You only had candles back then. So there is no way for you to see anything. Once the girl, at the end of this week ceremony, the boy is getting drunk, laughing, partying, living it up with his in-laws, excuse me. Once that whole week is done, that last day is very sacred. He's to clean himself, groom himself, get prepared. They'll pray over him. She's already been cleaned and cleansed, and she is sitting in that tent. She walks this path by herself. Sometimes the father would go with her and release her into this path. Now, once she gets to to this tent, she leaves the tent open. She gets herself prepared, fixes up the bed because that's all that's inside the tent, the bed, or the matrimonial bed, as you can say it. She'll fix that up, and when she's ready, she'll blow out the candle and close the tent. Once the family sees that the tent is closed and the lamp is out, they get pretty much hype up the boy and say, it's time to go. Time to be a man. He will now walk this path by himself and go and meet her in the tent. When he does that, he sleeps with her. He can talk to her, whatever, but he will never see her face because inside the tent is pitch black. The tent was made with thick linen so that way you could not see, no light could come in. After they do the do, when they wake up in the morning, once they open up the tent, they will finally see each other's face for the first time. The time he sees his wife, that is his wife for the rest of his life. And they usually wedded for good. Again, divorce was frowned upon. And usually, if the person was getting divorced, the other person died. And you usually stone her, and it was usually on the woman. But regardless of what it is, the reason why they did it this way was one, the father is supposed to signify God. God found a helper fit for Adam. Adam was put to sleep. And when he woke up, Eve was next to him. Eve was a part of him. So to symbolically do that, you can't see your wife until you have become one with your wife. So when you wake up in the morning, you see the face of your partner whom you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And because they are virgins, usually younger, they become best friends, they become partners, and they usually stay together for good. Now, again, they're most ancient civilizations didn't believe in the pull-out method. So usually by this time, she's already pregnant. You know, she consumes that first night, and then boom. marriage. Now they are in front of God's face, in front of God's eyes, husband and wife, the same way Adam and Eve would have been husband and wife. So that's just the basic concept of how a marriage would have been working back then. One other thing that happens with the woman is she has a maid wife. Now, the same thing that happens when the first portion is going on, when she is being paid for by the man's family, if she has like a little sister or a cousin or even a close friend that doesn't want to actually be married to a male, or who probably couldn't pass her bat mitzvah because she probably couldn't cook, or she, probably has some problems with her period, or just wasn't really good at housework, what ends up happening is she could be put up as a maidservant to help the person who is actually going to be the bride. Okay. You can get a maidservant through slavery, through conquering, or through trade, like Abraham did when he went to Egypt and Pharaoh gave him more servants. But usually, that maidservant is also considered a wife. Okay. Not in the sense of I'm married to you, but because you belong to my wife as one of her servants, my part to you is I still have to take care of you. So at the beginning of that contract, that agreement, if it was like the little sister and she still wanted to have kids, that would be discussed. And she could say, hey, look, I want a male heir. Cool. You pay that price for that too. And that would just add more to the price that you're paying. Whoever it was, so let's say it was Sarai and her little sister wanted to have a male heir, the father would pay for Sarai and the sister. Now, this is why there's a confusion when we get to today, modern day. They think that in the Bible, we were allowed to do polygamy. That was never the case. What happened was, if you were wealthy and could afford to have multiple women, usually by the force of having a maidservant for your wife, because of these contracts, usually your maidservant was going to get a male heir from you. Now, if your wife could not have kids, the maidservant becomes even more important because her first kid is not for the maidservant, it's for your wife. So it replaces the fact that your wife cannot have a kid. So usually, when the wife is having her first kid, the maidservant takes care of all the housely duties for the wife. And then vice versa, when the maidservant is pregnant, the wife takes care of everything. That's how the household works. Once the maidservant's job is done, you guys have all the kids you want. The maidservant is now free to go live her life with her children and start her own family or go wherever she wants to go. Usually they don't leave because they're pretty much taken care of. But if they wanted to, you could. That's why you see people have multiple wives, but in reality, it wasn't the fact that they had multiple wives. Abram was still married to only one person, but legally, the maidservant has to have a kid so that way they can be satisfied as well. It's not fair to have a woman who devotes her life to your household, but she can't live out her desires or a chance to have a kid of her own. Okay. But again, like I said, that is the misunderstanding that we have nowadays because we think this led to polygamy. No, it did not. If you could not afford it, you usually didn't have multiple wives. You only had one wife, and that was it. So in Sarah's case, because she was barren, that's why she ends up getting this as an idea and says, you know what, Abram, take my servant Hagar, have the baby with her, and that will be my son. That will be what God was looking for, and you will have your nation through him. Any questions before continue? And just a side note before I continue as well, if Hagar would have had a girl first, They would omit the girl. The girl would still technically be Abram's child, but they'll kind of put her in the back, like you're just gonna become another servant. What just happened? Okay, there we go. She would become another servant. So in that case, it's always up to the first boy. Then that's when everything starts. But anyways, as we continue, um, Abram did just as his wife asked him. He had a child with Hagar. Okay. Now, Abram does something that is reminiscent of what Adam did with Eve in the garden. He listened to the voice of his wife. God talked to Abram. He never talked to Sarai. He didn't tell Sarai, this is what I'm going to do for Abram. The same way God only talked to Adam and told Adam what he was going to do in the garden and what not to do. So again, this is why Abram also fails and now has a curse put upon the family, a curse that we're still dealing with till this day. Now, what is this curse? Because Hagar was pregnant, and as she started to enjoy her pregnancy and Sarai had to take care of her, some scholars believe it was because of the difference of culture. Sarai starts to despise Hagar. Hagar starts to act a little cocky, a little, higher, like, well, you got to take care of me because I'm the one with the kid. I'm important to you, so you can't do anything wrong to me. I'm protected. So when that happens, you can see the tension is there. What does Sarai do? She turns to Abram and says, this is your fault. This is your fault. This interaction, again, is why there is a problem in the Middle East till today. So just a little background on that. So what's going on in Palestine with the kids getting killed, and them pretty much massacring them, pretty much a modern day Holocaust. This is due to Abraham's decision to listen to Sarai. Reason being, we have one person fighting for the land. We have one person saying that they're the descendants who are the promised people. All because both of them have claim to the promised land, but only one of them was supposed to be the promised son. So when Sarai turns to Abram and tells him that this is your fault, Abram says, hold up, this is your doing. Again, remember when God asked the woman, what is this that you have done in the garden? She turned to Adam. Adam said, God, this is not me. You put this woman here. Abram is doing the same exact thing. This is not me. This is your fault. So he washes his hands of the situation and he tells her, this is your responsibility. That's your servant. So you deal with her. Again, we have another man failing in his duty to lead his wife. You listen to her, you failed again, and now instead of taking responsibility and leading, you're letting her take over. So because of that, the way Sarah starts to treat Hagar is increasingly harsh. She does enough not to kill her and not to hurt the baby, but does enough to make Hagar so scared and upset that she runs away. It's Genesis 16 verses 1 through 6. Now, this is the modern day dispute that we have for Abram and his children. So we have Ishmael, the firstborn, and we have Isaac, which will be the son that we talk about later. From Ishmael, we have the Arab and the Palestinians that are born from his lineage. Okay. Being the firstborn son, you always have the right to the inheritance. That's how it works. You're born first, you get the blessing. Even if you were twins, if you're born first, you get the double portion, you get the blessing, you become the leader of the family. So By the flesh, since Sarah used her fleshly ideas and not what God had as a divine idea, Ishmael is born through the flesh. So by legal custom and by the moral of the legal humanistic ways, anything that's Abram's would be Ishmael's, meaning he would be the inheritor of that promise that God gave him. But as God will tell Abram, I never told you to have Ishmael. I told you I was going to give you a son, and you didn't wait for me because you started doubting me. So you went out and did your own thing. So now you're going to have to deal with that problem. And because of you, the rest of your generations will be cursed. Now, what does that remind us of? Because of you, Adam and Eve, your generations going to be cursed, right? Same thing all over again. We're dealing with sin because of Adam and Eve, and we're dealing with a war in the Middle East till this day because of Abram. And we're going to see this whole thing happen all over again in a couple chapters. But again, so Arabs and Palestinians are descendants from Ishmael. From Isaac, we have the Israelites and the Jews. They have a prophetic right to the land. So one has a legal right, the other one has a prophetic right. And that is the main reason why they fight till this day. One group believes that this is what God had for us. So it doesn't matter how long ago it was, this is our land. You're not supposed to be here. While the other ones say, well, we are the firstborn children, so we deserve this land because we are Abram's first kids. And that is the big fight that's happening in the Middle East. Now, the birth of Ishmael. After Hagar flees to the one of the wells in the desert to go cry and wonder how she ended up in such a predicament, because again, she was told of the rules, she knew what was going on, and she followed it. Now, of course, she's not taking accountability for the fact that she started acting a little high and mighty, but she's trying to figure out why she's being treated so worse and so bad. So she's confronted by an angel who tells her, is you need to go back and continue being a servant. Let God do his will and you will be protected. So this angel gives her instructions on what she is to name the child and how she's supposed to act after Ishmael is born. She promised, or she was promised, that her son will become a father of great nations. Now, more importantly, he tells her, your son will be a nation of great princes, 12 princes to be exact. These are what we call the Arab nations, that later become Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. All those Middle Eastern countries, still to this day, thanks to Islam as well, they can actually still trace their family lineages back to Ishmael. And Jewish people cannot. Everybody else's history has been lost, but the Middle Eastern people actually can still follow their family lineage all the way back to Ishmael, again, which is why they still fight back in Palestine. Um, so she was promised that her son would become a father of a great nation. So she gives birth to Ishmael, and she names the well that she is at as Berlahoyo. Berlahoy. There we go. Which means the well of the living one who sees me. Now, this conversation between her and the angels is within Genesis 16, verses 7 through 16. All right. Now, Ishmael, this is verse 11 and 12. You are now pregnant and are about to give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your painful groans. He will be a wild donkey of a man, which is just another way to say he will really be a strong man. He'll be hostile to everyone, and everybody will be, or everyone will be hostile to him. He will live away from his brothers. Okay. Ishmael means God shall hear. He is Abram's firstborn son, but not the promised son of the prophecy. He was a rough and rowdy child, but strong. And Abram, at the ripe age of 86, is when he has him. Okay. After he has him at 86 for 13 years, so 13 years, Ishmael is 13 years old. He doesn't hear anything from God. But Abram is a great father. He loves his son. He's starting to believe that Ishmael is the promised one. And this is where we get the descendants of the Ishmaelites who know the word. And this is why when we look at Islam, it still has the Torah as still the reference point. One of the things that Ishmael would have learned from Abram is the things that Abram was learning from God. So, how to pray, who God is. So, this is the reason why he knows the existence of God up to this point. So at 99, 13 years later, one day God actually embarks to Abraham and says, listen, walk before me and be blameless. It's a big command. Doesn't literally stop everything you're doing. If you're going to walk in front of me, I need you to be perfect. I demand a walk of perfection, which means you need to trust me. From here on out, you can no longer doubt me because I'm about to change your life. The always of self-reliance, meaning whatever your wife says or whatever you can come up with and surmise, that's done with. You rely on me, nobody else. All that self-reliance, self-doubt, all that is gone. Here's where the new promise begins. Walk before me and be blameless. He changes Abram's name, which was a high father, exalted father, to father of many nations. Sarai, he changes from contentious to princess and mother of nations. Okay. So God renames the couple to align them with their future reality, not Sarai's current barrenness. So he tells her, listen, for you guys to be the people that I need you to be, I have to change your identity. You guys can no longer do this by yourself. You need me to do it. And we're gonna break down their names in a second. But now Sarai is now the princess. She's the mother of nations, hand in hand with Abraham, the father of nations. So she's supposed to serve as the redemption figure for Eve because she rehearsed Eve's sin by leading the man into failure. She's now going to represent Eve as well. You are Abram no longer. Okay. So in Genesis 17, verse 5, this is when he actually renames them. And he tells them you'll have multitudes of descendants. Okay. And a king will come from you. This is where we get the next prophecy being fulfilled, that the seed that he told Adam and Eve is being reaffirmed here. And he tells Abraham, now no longer Abram, but Abraham, he will have to have a perpetual covenant with him that will extend for future generations. This is how he'll separate them from the rest of the world. This will be his people. All right. So trigger warning. We will get a little biological in a second. We'll be talking about circumcision. So fair warning. So with the name, which is, if you guys are taking notes, this is what I want you to write down. So Abram to Abraham. Now notice the symbols for Abram and Abraham. The symbol Hey is added in there. The full name of the symbol is Haman Gomin. All right, that's the Hebrew word for this symbol. Now, this symbol right here, it is supposed to represent God. So we know God's name is Yahweh. And to represent that in a word, when you are not speaking of his name, but you're talking about God, you will use this character that looks like an N. It means hey. All right. So Yahweh, hey. This is Haman Gomin. And this is where you say God is part of something. This is how you would add God into it. So just like God said, you are no longer to rely on yourself and your doubt. You're going to rely on me. God literally puts himself into Abraham. This is why Abraham's name goes from Abram to Abraham. Okay? He adds his name into Abraham's name. So now he's adding the spirit, the divine involvement, his covenant identity in his own breath into Abraham's name. Not only that, he adds it to Sarah's name as well. This is why it's so important when he gets a new name, because his identity is no longer Abram, the man who was supposed to be the father. Now he is the father that he was always meant to be, because God is helping him. God's breath is upon him. God's spirit, his nature is upon him. That spirit is with him. Okay? So when that happens, Hamon Gomin, for both Sarah and for Abraham, you guys are no longer who Adam and Eve were before. This is me giving you the lion's cloth. Adam and Eve came with the fig leaves to cover themselves from the sin, and I gave them new clothes. This is your new clothes. I'm putting myself on you now. I will walk with you from here on out. That's the meaning behind their name. So when you say Abraham and Sarah, understand what you're saying. This is no longer just one man by himself. This is not a woman by herself. This is the new Adam and Eve who's supposed to usher in his people. So now we go to that perpetual covenant that God wanted. Now remember, we already went over what was the three parts always required for a covenant to be done. You need the promise or the agreement, you need the people who the agreement are with, and you need the sign to show that it's that agreement. So what was the promise? That Sarah will bear a son, and the heritage that he will have is the promise that God has already been talking about. Who are the people? Abraham, Sarah, and their descendants. This is their destiny as the new Adam and Eve. Their people and all the people that follow after them. What is the sign? All the men of his descendants, himself and all of his kids, have to circumcise themselves. Anybody who doesn't know what a circumcision is when a boy is born, usually at the hospital, they'll take the foreskin of his private area and they'll cut it off. Now, it serves two major parts. One, for of course, for the covenant. God is saying this sensitive part on a male, it's no longer for the male. You're giving me that sensitive part. We're cutting away your flesh. You're not feeling for the world anymore. All your feelings are for me. Whatever I feel is what you feel. So when we cut that skin, we're cutting the world away from us. We are a new person for God. That's the covenant. Now, it was usually done with a heated flint knife like this. And it would prevent infection because, of course, it's heated. But what it also did to help them out, most guys, if they didn't survive long in the desert, it was because they usually got sick. There was diseases, and when the skin either was cut or cauterized in a sense, it would keep them from getting sick from having dirt in their private area. If, of course, you're sweating, there's no people are not taking showers like we do today. So, of course, this was another way to make sure and ensure that one, Sarah's not getting sick from Abraham. Two, Abraham will survive, Sarah will survive, or Sarah will survive. Not only that, their generations will survive as well because they'll be healthier, they'll be cleaner. Now, mind you, this usually happens to kids that are born freshly out the womb. They won't feel it, they won't remember it. But you have a man, an old man, is 99 years old, going through this. All the men in his household at the moment are going through this as grown people. Just imagine the pain. But this is the sacrifice. And this is the first pain, the first blood that is shed to signify the flesh that will be pierced and cut in the future. Every single time we have another covenant or another sacrifice in this sense, the blood gets more, the cutting gets more, the pain gets more until we eventually reach the cross. So just keep that in mind as well. All right. Before we go to the promise of laughter, any questions? I know I just gave you guys a lot.
Uh, no, well, I guess I got a question, but clarified a lot with just the reason of um well the circumcision, but also the names with Sarah um from Sarah from Sarai to Sarah, and then Abram to Abraham. I didn't realize, you know, God putting His name into their names and making it like the new Adam and Eve, which is I didn't uh I didn't realize that.
And what's
And
crazy about that? Oh, just to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, what's
yeah.
crazy about it is if you read it in English, you'll never know that. You have to actually read it in Hebrew to understand the difference in that. But continue.
Oh yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, seeing it, and actually, I've never even seen uh like Hebrew text, so seeing it on that slide was nice to see, like see the understanding of it, of the word, of the symbols, and uh oh, is with the circumcision also is like, is that a parent decision now in like this day and age? Like, would is the does the doctor automatically do that, or do they ask the parent, or like how does that? What do you think?
For the most part, from what I know, they usually ask up north, where I'm from, the most of the hospitals are Jewish owned, so they just automatically do it out of practice and out of religion. But you also have the right to tell them no. But down here it's a little different. Um, I
Yeah,
know,
in the Bible Belt South.
yeah, but you'll be surprised. The Bible Belt actually is more liberal with those things. Um, I don't want to really pick on her, but Erica, I know you have a son. When you were having your son, did they give you the choice, or did you, how was that process?
Yeah, they gave me the choice,
Okay.
and I was able to sign like a consent form and everything.
Okay. Good, good, good. Yeah, so that to answer your question, because I don't have a son yet. So, um,
Oh,
yeah,
makes sense. Okay.
But my son didn't get circumcised until he was 10 months due to what had happened in the hospital.
gotcha. Okay, fair enough.
Rather
Um,
10 months than what was he was 13. Um, Abraham's son. I can't like, yeah, like you said, the pain, but what it represents, the bloodshed, and the first
mhm.
bloodshed. So
So, yeah, Ishmael was the youngest at 13, but everybody else was grown people, with
right,
Abraham being 99. Like she said, her son was 10 months, and most other boys get it literally coming right out the womb, right then and there in the hospital. So just to understand the pain tolerance, you could be the toughest of men, but it takes time to heal from that.
yeah. Thanks for
So
clearing that up.
no problem, no problem. Like I said, everything that God does, especially through Genesis, which is why I always like to start off Bible study with going through Genesis. Everything that he does, if you want to understand the reason for Christ being on the cross, look at the way that he did the footsteps from here on out, and you'll realize every time he did more and more, we start seeing more of a sacrifice, more of something being shed until we actually get to Jesus on the cross. So, all right, moving into the promise of laughter. So, at this point, we get that famous story after everything is done. we get 3 visitors that come to talk to Abraham. And while they're talking to Abraham, they tell Abraham, hey, you're going to have a son in about a year. Sarah, overhearing this, laughs at it and says, I'm 90 years old. God waited till I was 90. And you're telling me in 1 year, I'm going to have a kid? Not happening. It's impossible. You could have said in your 80s, your 70s, your 60s. Okay. But 90, definitely at 90. Even at 89, I would say that's the last percentage of me having a child if possible. But at 90, it's almost impossible. I'm too old now. So they told him the child would be named Isaac because since she laughed and didn't believe, she was still doubting. God already told you everything's changing. You're still doubting. And so they said, because of her laughter, because she thought it was a joke, that's what he's going to be named. So God, in this instance, waited until it was almost biologically impossible for a child to be born. He actually redoes this again with Jesus when he's raising Lazarus from the dead. He waits until 3 days are passed. Why? Because in the Hebrew culture, after 3 days, the spirit has separated from the body. So it's impossible for the person to come back to life. Which is why Jesus never ran to go resurrect him. God always wants to show his power and his dominion. When he says something's going to change, it's always going to change. So if he says you're going to have a kid in 1 year, you're going to have a kid in 1 year. If he says you're going to come up back out of that grave, even after the time is supposed to be done, you're going to come up back out of that grave. So this is the reason why they call it the promise of laughter. So the real promise. Isaac, the promised son, is to be born of Abraham and Sarah. Their names have been changed. We went over that. But if Abraham follows his covenant with God, he will be fine. And his son will be the person to fulfill the promise. Once Abraham now, again, operating within his godhood, with God being within him, Abraham is now known, the text in Hebrew actually changes to now noting that Abraham is no longer just a regular man. He is technically a prophet at this point. This is why the Islamic faith says Abraham the prophet. Because at this point in Hebrew and Aramaic, when they write his name out, that title that follows him because of that hey initial pretty much says that he is anointed. So in that sense, he is God's prophet. So this is the reason why now, remember, Abram was trying to hear a voice from God. He got a message, hey, go out there, leave everything you know. I'm going to give you a child. He'll give him a vision. But now he actually has angels coming to him because now it's no longer the same God. This is the father of faith. This is a person who now has to believe in God, nobody else. So because now Abraham is getting his confidence and Abraham understands after doing that, I wouldn't do that if I didn't trust in him no more. Now that I actually fully believe and fully am devoted to this God called Yahweh, this God who has taken me out of everything that I've known and has placed me in a place where I'm going to become the father of multitudes, I trust him. No matter what, I trust him. So God says, because you trust me, because you believe in me, now my conversation with you can change. Since I'm a part of you, now I can actually communicate with you even more. You are doubting that you never heard my voice. All you got to do is lift up your eyes and you can talk to me. I have that connection with you now. This is the reason why baptism, this is where we get the first understanding of baptism. It's from here, not in the New Testament. It's actually from here in Hebrew. Once Abraham's name is changed and God is added into him and he has that spirit, this is the prelude to baptism. And with that being said, that connection, that opening up, that friendship with God is the reason why now Abraham is able to now When he asked, God says, I bet. You want to know something? I'm going to talk to you directly. Abraham gets three visitors, two angels, and here goes that word again, the theophany. And they explain to Abraham, you will have a child. Abraham believes, even though he's shocked, but Sarah, still not understanding where God has placed her, laughs. But after this is done with, the angels and his theophany turns Abraham to the side. They said, listen, God had a conversation with us, and he was deciding if he should tell you about his plans. And he wants to tell you his plans. So this is what's going to happen. So we're going to turn our attention to now Sodom and Gomorrah. So, like I said, the Lord debates if he should tell Abraham, and because he's credited him with the faith that he has to trust him, he tells him, listen, as the visitors are going to leave, the Lord reveals to them that, hey, I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because of their wickedness. Why is Sodom and Gomorrah important? Because that's where Lot lives. That's why it would bother Abraham. So now Abraham pleads with God. The Bible says he pleads with God. Okay? There's a reason why now he's pleading. Before he was doubting, he never was hearing his voice. Now he's pleading with him. That means there's a conversation going on. He asked him to spare the cities if righteous people can be found there, bargaining down from 50 to 45 to 30 to 10. Righteous people if they're found. It gets to the point where God gets annoyed with him for asking so many questions. God tells him, listen, if I could find these people, I'll spare the whole city. That's my deal. So we're going to break it down a little bit more about the Abraham pleads. So now, because Abraham is walking by faith now, he can boldly speak to God. And he says, listen, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? You're going to punish the good people with the bad? And they didn't do nothing wrong? This is Genesis 18, verse 23. Abraham appeals to God's character. This is how God wants us to talk to him when we're praying. Okay? So what Abraham is doing here when he's pleading with God, this is another way of prayer. Okay? This is why we have different versions. And when we go over fasting in the future, we'll come back to Genesis 18. But this is one of the types of prayers. We have petition, we have just regular fasting, regular meditation. Pleading is one of those things as well. When Abraham is pleading to him, he appeals to God's character. He said, shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Saying, God, you're this person who always does right. You wouldn't change that for just one situation, right? Genesis 18, verse 25. And each time God responds to him for the sake of the 50, the 45, the so on and so on. Whatever number he told him, he said, I would not destroy it. Genesis 18, verse 32. He said, finally, for the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. And that, again, that 10 is one of the numbers that we went over a couple Bible studies ago where we said, remember, these numbers are going to repeat, and they actually mean something. This was the final number that Abraham stopped at. And God said, yes, even if 10 are found, I'll stop for that. Now, why was the number 10 that he stopped at? Okay. Or before we go over why number 10 is where he stopped at, what Abraham did with God shows this. God is just. God can distinguish between the righteous and the wicked. He's not just a God who just destroys everything, boom. He's starting to get specific with when it comes to this judgment, because he already told Adam and Eve, this is what's going to happen. He already told Noah, I'm not going to wipe out the earth again. So now he's telling Abraham, this is what I'm going to do. Because I have people who are good and people who are bad, I'm only going to attack the bad. I'm willing to spare judgment for the sake of righteousness. God allows Abraham to intercede on their behalf, to pray for them. Again, any situation you're going on in your life, because of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, we have the right to intercede on our behalf, on other people's behalves, any given time. If anything, God invites this relational dialogue, because this is what he wants. That's the communication. When you say you have a friend in God, this is what he's looking for. So why did Abraham stop at 10? One, because surely Lot's household didn't go past 10 as a number. Okay? 10 was considered a minimal community unit in the Hebrew culture. Once you had 10, that's when you start your own household. Since Lot didn't have a city yet or a tent established that said this is Lot's city, or the people that follow after Lot will be the Lot Hams or whatever, Lotites, because that hasn't been established yet, he couldn't have been bigger than 10. But in Genesis 19, when the angels arrived, there was not even 10 righteous people that they could find. Only Lot's immediate family was the only ones that was rescued, which is Lot, his 2 daughters, and his wife. None of the servants, none of the other people that he had when he left Abraham, just his wife, his 2 daughters, and himself. So just to show Abraham favor, God said he would stop the destruction for 10. Lot should have died with them. But in that, God said, I'm going to protect you just because you have the protection from Abraham, because you were with him. So he tells him, hey, look, the 2 angels told him, leave. So we get the 2 angels appearing in the city as men. Okay. They arrive in Sodom and Gomorrah, or in Sodom. Sodom and Gomorrah are 2 different cities, but again, they're right next to each other. So that's why they usually refer to both of them. But they arrive in Sodom, and they were offered hospitality by Lot. Lot sees them, Lot invites them and says, hey, don't stay in the city square. Go ahead and come into my house. And, everybody's wondering as you're reading the story, why come into my house and not stay in the city square? This is when Lot kind of tells them, hey, the people of this city are really strange. They're very sexually deprived. And the men of the city, seeing these angels, realizing that they're not regular human beings. Remember, in Adam's story, in Adam and Eve, the angels were having kids with the daughters of Adam, right? People still know this story exists. Having intercourse with an angel is supposed to be this feeling that's beyond this realm. These people are so filled with lust that this is what they're looking for. So Genesis 19, verse 4-5, before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. That's how lust-filled they were. Just to show you kind of a demonstration. Now, here is where we get the depravity of Sodom, okay? They start banging on the door. They're telling Lot, hey, look, we know those 2 angels are in your house. Go ahead and send them out so we can have our way with them. Lot tells them, hey, you guys don't do this. You're going to incur God's wrath. This is not the right thing to do. You guys know it. Think before you make a big mistake. They pursue them, and they keep breaking. They say, well, break down the door. We want them. Lot says, hey, I'll make a deal with you guys. I'll give you guys my 2 virgin daughters if you leave the angels alone. They're so sex deprived and so lust filled that they said, we don't even want your virgin daughters. As you know, if any culture, a virgin daughter is the pretty much like gold. It doesn't get better than that. They're so lust filled, they don't even care for that anymore. They said they want strange flesh. Strange flesh. They want something new, a new experience. The rest of it they can't do. You got pedophilia happening in here. You got homosexuality happening in here. You have every little thing that could be happening. Lust-wise, violence-wise, sin-wise. Sin itself is the epicenter of this city, and which is the reason why God marked it for destruction. Had God left this city to stay around, it would have bred to all the cities and all the cultures out there in the world. Just to give one more caveat to this, in that region, which would become the nation of Edom, the Edomites, they all had the same type of way of doing manhood. So the Hebrew culture, the Aramaic cultures, they would do the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvahs. These people, however, they didn't do that for manhood ceremonies. What they did for manhood ceremonies was, if you came to the city, you had a wife, you had kids, they can get a house temporarily, but the man and the son were supposed to go up the mountain with a mentor, and they had to survive for almost 2 to 3 months with this mentor. If they could survive this mentor for those couple months, once they came back down the mountain, they would be granted citizenship, and they would become men, and their family would be recognized as citizens in that city. That right there was already sinful within what God did not want to happen. Reason being, they were taking young boys and forcing them to go up the mountains with these older men, making them survive for 3 months of torture, of rape, sodomy, lust, telling them this is the way that life goes, pretty much indoctrinating them and pretty much beating them up if they felt like it. By the time the boy came back, now they consider him a man. And then the next time somebody new comes to the city, that boy is going to go do it to them. And that way it was literally being spread to the next, to the next, to the next. When those two angels come up, that's what they want to do with them. We're going to have our way with you, and then we're going to send you up to the mountain, and then you guys are going to become part of our city and join into this whole cesspool of sin. Wasn't going to happen. So this is the reason why a lot of people like to pick and choose when it comes to the story. Oh, it was talking about homosexuality. No, it was talking about pedophilia. It was talking about all of it. All of it. Any type of sexual sin you could think of, animals, weird objects, you name it. All of it was happening here. So not only is it a sin by itself, I'm going to talk about the double fault in a second, but we got the sin itself and the violation of the natural order. It's the only time God talks about a double fault in the flesh. So the angels give one last final warning to Lot and his family. He says, listen, take your family, flee the city to avoid destruction. Now, during this destruction, again, I talked about the double fault in the flesh. The double fault means you sinned twice as much as a regular sin. This is the reason why you hear a lot of people in the Bible Belt saying homosexuality is a double sin, and it's hard to get it cleaned off of you. This is why God not only destroyed the city, he cleaned the city off the face of the earth. When somebody wants to ask, is homosexuality, is pedophilia, if all these sexual sins are actually against the Bible because it doesn't clearly say it, oh, well, he didn't say pedophilia was bad or homosexuality was bad. Don't look no further than this. No other place in the world or in the Bible does God chemically clean and sterilize a city off the face of the earth. It says he rains down sulfur and brimstone. There's another word that they use for sulfur and brimstone, but I'll get to that after this slide. But back then, when you put these things together, okay, sulfur becomes brimstone. And when you put it together, these are the agents that you would use to chemically bleach something in the past. Okay. You burn it, add some water to it and burn it, and that would chemically clean it. Wherever it was, there's no residue no more. So he didn't just burn the city, he chemically sterilized the sin from the earth. If you want to know if that was ever not accepted by God, there goes your answer. He tells you, one, it's a double fault in the sin. He said it changes the natural order. and he goes and he reaffirms it by sterilizing it, not just destroying, not flooding, not raining it down or thunder. Not no, he sterilizes it off the face of the earth. Is a complete removal of the infection of depravity. Now, we get to a point where Lot's wife turns back as she is warned not to look back, and she turns to a pillar of salt. Now, a lot of people give a lot of flack to the Bible for this because they want to wonder how was that even possible? How does that even happen for somebody to turn into a pillar of salt? It leaves only Lot and his two daughters to survive. Genesis 19, verse 26. But Lot's wife looked back and she became a pillar of salt. Okay? The area where Sodom and Gomorrah is by the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is known for its high salt concentration. Okay? There's stalagmites that's are on the ground. So pillars of salt, literally. There's so much salt in the water of the Dead Sea. If you go lay in it, you will float. That is probably the hardest water for you to just lay in and drown. You literally sit in it and you will float because there's so much salt in it. So what they called it was gophrite. All right. So it's sulfur, but otherwise with brimstone. When you burn sulfur, you have a blue flame, a blue fire. It's in a very intense heat. If anybody's ever been to hibachi before, you know when that fire is lit, even if you're not even sitting in front of it directly, you still get a burst of that flame. Well, this blue flame is so intense, you could be miles away and you still get hit with it. Not only that, sulfur, when it burns, it produces sulfur dioxide, which is a very toxic gas. Once you get it, you'll die. Okay? You'll get sulfur dioxide poisoning. You don't want that. But it gets even more wicked from here. Add some water to sulfur dioxide, you get sulfuric acid, which can lead to chemical burns, acid rain. All this is happening over there because of the Dead Sea with the flame, everything's getting added into it. So combustion with the salt from the Dead Sea would lead to an intense shockwave of a thermal blast, which would also be enough to get her covered in salt deposits instantaneously. The mineral crust from her dying from the heat and the salt sticking to her body from the dust would make her pretty much start a mineral crust forming around her remains. Over time, we're left with what resembles a salt pillar formation. Near the Dead Sea today, there are plenty of natural salt pillars still to this day. We even have the part on the mountain where we see Lot would have been leaving, and we have the actual salt mine. I was looking for the picture, I couldn't find it, but we actually have the salt formation that is known today as probably the remains of Lot's wife. Because what it turns into like a solid rock.
That's insane. That's insane.
Mm-hmm. We have it till this day. That is actual proof. They've actually researched it and they found actual organic chemicals inside, pretty much resuming that somebody had to have life there before. Now, why is this not a fairy tale and actually true life? A lot of people don't believe the Bible, but they believe Pompeii. Now, if you remember back in history class, Pompeii had the destruction from the volcano, okay? A volcano erupting and leveling out a city pretty much would create the same thing here. Pompeii, they were covered in ash, and the heat solidified them, which is why in Pompeii we had people who were pretty much like frozen statues of black soot and ashes that flash froze them from the heat and burned them into these solid things of rock with their features and everything just there. The lava, everything put together, flash froze them into these statues. This is exactly the same thing that's happening with the sulfur and brimstone from this heat. So if we can believe Pompeii, which we talk about in history class all day long, and that's a fact, because you have pictures of the people that we seen in their houses, bread, all that stuff that was solidified because of all that. Why can't we believe that Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt? It's the same process. So when they say it's a fairy tale, no, you can tell them, no, this is historically accurate and it's chemically accurate. You can prove it both ways. Stefan, you have something to say?
Yeah, I didn't see that. I didn't realize that I mean, like you said, historically accurate and scientifically accurate, which is because that's straight science with what, like, just the natural elements and the periodic table and how
Mm-hmm.
that works. That's unbelievable. Like I didn't catch that either. Wow.
And they say God is not in everything. That's the makeup of everything.
Shaking my head. I'm just kidding.
They have to give him his credit. Listen, they can't say the world started with no Big Bang. This is too intricate to just be a chance reaction. No, sir. But continuing. So we have Lot's wife turning into salt. She looked back. The question that often gets asked in Sunday school is, why did she turn behind when she was told not to? Was she just curious? Did she just want to see the destruction? No. What people don't realize is when Lot left, he didn't have a wife. When he left Abraham, he didn't have a wife, which means he more than likely found this wife in Sodom. So what does that mean? She is a descendant of these people who are full of this sin. So if that's all she knew, if that's where she came from, of course there's a part of her that still longs for that lifestyle. As we see, God tells you to keep walking and to flee from sin. And sometimes some of us want to turn around and go back to it. This is her still having God telling you to leave something behind, but a part of you is still longing for it. So as soon as she turned back, that was literally her admission of guilt. That was her pretty much saying, a part of me still wants to do what I known to do in Sodom. I was used to this lust. I was used to all these things that we were doing. I still want to do it. But for what God wants to happen in the future, that can't follow. The same way with Noah and the ark. Anybody who was going to continue to perpetuate the sin, you got to go. I don't want you corrupting anybody else. So with her doing that, that was boom, just like that. You just told me that if you got a chance to make it away, you were going to start the cycle back up wherever you and Lot go. Which is why you often hear pastors giving you the car scenario. The front windshield is the biggest windshield on the car, the biggest window, because it's meant to give you the space and the capacity to see forward, to see the bigger picture. But the rear mirror, the rear windshield is smaller because whatever's behind you is not important anymore. That's what you're leaving behind. That's not what you focus on. You focus on what's coming up in front of you, where the big screen is, not where the small screen is. So let's continue. So the lessons that we get from this transformation is, one, patience. Don't go birthing an Ishmael when you're supposed to be waiting for an Isaac. The cost of helping God is generations of conflict. That could be a generational punishment for you and your family. You make a choice out of, oh, I'm not hearing from God. Am I supposed to take this job? Am I supposed to do this? Am I supposed to go hang out with this friend? And then boom, because you weren't patient enough, you just cause yourself issues for the rest of your life. Not only for your life, your children's life, your grandchildren's life. The cost of helping God can be generations of conflict. Our second thing that we learn from here, identity. Your nature must always, not must, but must always change before your destiny can be fulfilled. No man in the Bible has his destiny fulfilled without changing his identity. Jacob turns to Israel. David's name wasn't changed, but David went from a shepherd boy to king. We get the prince who is a refugee in Jesus to being the king of peace on the cross. We get Saul, who was a murderer, who becomes Paul, one of the main characters of the New Testament. Whenever your destiny needs to be fulfilled, God will change your identity. That often means that there's friends that you won't see no more. There's places that you won't be able to go no more. Things that you used to like won't be interesting to you no more. Your identity has to change. Your identity has to change for your destiny to be fulfilled. And the last lesson we learn from it, separation. Usually, once you have the patience to actually get your Isaac and your identity is changing, God will usually tell you to separate, to flee, to run. Don't look back at wherever you came from, whatever sin that you used to be caught up in, whatever addiction, whatever thing that was holding you back from your walk with Him. Once all these things are done, that's your transformation. Don't go back to Abram. If you're Abraham, don't operate like Abram anymore. Don't have that doubt. Be Abraham, you walk with faith. Two different people. We spent last week's Bible study just seeing a man who was just depressed and felt like he had no purpose in life. Now we have a man that's starting to walk with God and talk to Him and even plead on a nation's behalf that he don't even know everybody there. That's the transformation. This is what God is waiting from a lot of us for. What is God telling you to flee from? What is God telling you that you need to change in your identity? What is He telling you to have patience for, because He's already birthing something in you? Because when we do that and we trust the vision, we start to get better things in our lives, what we usually call our blessings. Just as Lot was forced out of Sodom for his own good, most of the time we're pushed out of our own comfort places before destruction hits. How many of us knows people that if I went to that party, I might have been in a bad situation, could have got in a fight, could have got shot, disaster could have happened. Trust the vision. It's protection. Just like losing a comfortable job or relationship often feels like failure, sometimes God is forcibly moving you towards your true vocation. He's moving you towards a place where it's like, hey, Isaac can't be born in that mess. It's not suitable for this job to happen. It's not suitable for your career to take off there. It's not suitable for these friendships, these relationships, these things that I want for you to be there. I need to move you, separate you, so that way I can change your identity. I can make you a better person. And you could be a CEO. You could be a better teacher. You could be a better visionary. You could be a better business owner. You could be a better person, a better mom, a better sister, brother, child. Whatever it may be, trust the vision. So I'll leave you guys with that. Next week, we have the final story, the final installment of Abraham, the faithful. So next week, we got 4 chapters to read. Chapters 20, 21, 22, and 23. And from there, I will see you guys next week. Go ahead, stop sharing. So with that being said, any questions? Any comments or concerns?
Just good study tonight. Explaining just those 2 chapters in Genesis. Got a lot of good notes, good information I didn't know, and clarification on stuff. So, yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Good. Good. Nice. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and pray, and we'll be good to go. All right. Lord Father God, thank you again for today. Thank you for giving us the patience and the awareness and just the concentration to be able to get through this Bible study, albeit it was content heavy. Lord, we ask that you continue to give us the capacity to digest every week. If we're making this commitment to you, Lord, give us the capacity to withhold and understand and digest everything that's being said. Lord, let us have the fortitude to continue to pay attention and just be immersed in you. Lord, continue to make that connection between us grow. Continue to teach us how to trust your vision. Continue to teach us how to have that patience, our identity, that transformation within you, Lord. Help us to walk hand in hand with you every day. We ask that you continue to bless us as we go to sleep tonight, Lord, and protect us and walk with us. Give us sweet dreams. Let the rest of our week be great and be blessed by you. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.